Today we're going to be talking some more about postage stamps.
And the way, sorry, I shouldn't have thrown an in there. Sorry.
I thought I deleted it and it just moved around.
I know, you know what, you did, but I was picking up on the conversation. I was ad-libbing. All right, sorry about that. Start over, please.
You kill me. Okay, take 3. Hey everyone, it's Elliot.
And Todd. Welcome to Two Designers Walk Into a Bar, an ongoing conversation about pop culture and iconic design.
Today we're going to be talking some more about postage stamps.
The way they reflect pop culture.
And how they are an art form that celebrates other art forms.
We're talking about some stamps with fluid line work and a whole lot of shaking going on.
So mix up a couple of 2-cent stamp cocktails.
And join us once again as we send you a couple more stories from right here in the bar.
We're back in the bar, Todd, once again,
Yep.
talking stamps.
Are we talking tramp stamps, Elliot?
Well, you're wearing a shirt, so I'm not sure. But you tell me.
Okay. Well, I guess any kind of stamp I have would be a tramp stamp, wouldn't it?
We'll leave that to the
okay,
listener
no
imagination if there are any left.
All right. Speaking of our wonderful listeners, our last episode, you dropped a lot of knowledge bombs around the history of stamps.
Yes.
And it was a little more, I'm going to say, complex than I would have thought and more interesting than I would have thought. So, dear listener, you don't have to go listen to that episode to hear this one, of course, but you might want to. Stamps have kind of a long, funky history, don't they, Elliot?
They do. And, Todd, it wouldn't be a true conversation if there wasn't a little bit of scandal and controversy peppered in there, right?
I love scandal and controversy, of course. All right. And I had told you this when we were in the middle of the last episode.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know a lot about stamps, but I do know one in particular. And I don't know if they've even released any other stamps.
This is it. The Postal Service hung it up after this. They said, this is the best we can do.
They stopped after this one. And as well as you know me, I bet you could guess the stamp I'm talking about.
I have an idea.
I mean, of all the millions of stamps. Okay, so it is from the Legends of American Music series. Is that helping confirm your suspicion there?
So it's Liberace?
Oh, man, have they done a Liberace stamp?
We should look that up. That would be...
Yeah, that would be cool.
Bedazzled and
I know.
Rococo and, yeah.
Would you pick young Liberace or old Liberace?
Fur-clad Liberace.
Okay, yeah, there's no other, right? But the stamp I'd like to tell you a little bit more about is the most popular commemorative stamp ever issued. Not one of the most popular, the most popular commemorative stamp issued.
Well, la-dee-da.
And you can probably guess what it is by that.
Well, I mean, you said American entertainment, right? Or music, Legends of Music?
American music, yeah. Legends of American Music, yeah.
Of all time. Well...
Our listeners are in traffic right now, banging
they are.
Their steering wheels. Like, Elliot, you know that it's the Elvis series.
You know what? I'm going to guess the Elvis series.
Oh, good job, Elliot. You do know me pretty well, and you know your stamps well.
And I'm a good listener.
Well, debatable, but all right, we'll talk about that later. But there were 2 Elvis stamps that were released back in 1993.
Okay.
There was the one called Young Elvis, and the other one, not to get mixed up with that one, they called it Old Elvis.
Okay.
So I know. So the Young Elvis stamp was actually first issued on January 8th, 1993. It was first issued and dedicated and canceled at Graceland.
Okay.
And that date, January 8th, would have been Elvis Presley's 58th birthday if he would have lived. He had died, of course, 16 years earlier, tragically.
So you say. I mean,
well, allegedly, if he had
Right.
allegedly died, yes. So he probably got a pretty good laugh out of, having these stamps.
he and Bigfoot were patting each other on the back and just pointing and laughing and laughing.
Right, just laughing. Yeah. They're like, ha, ha, ha. You're like, Bigfoot. There's no Bigfoot stamp, you
Right.
dummy.
And then they flew away in their spaceship.
That's right. As I said a few minutes ago, these stamps were part of the Legends of American Music series, so this was the first time it was released. The Young Elvis, which was the artwork was acrylic and airbrush, and it was done on board by an illustrator still active today, a guy named Mark Stutzman, and he was fairly young at the time.
Elvis or Stutzman?
Well, Elvis was middle-aged, as you know. It was his 58th birthday, so he was slowing down a bit by then.
Oh,
but
okay.
Stutzman was pretty young. And
Well, I thought this was young Elvis. I thought we were talking about young Elvis.
it is, but it was on his 58th birthday. So
But he painted young Elvis.
yeah, he did. Yeah.
I'm really confused right now.
Okay, well, let me clear it up a little bit. It was young Elvis. It was based on Elvis's appearance in his 1956 film Love Me Tender, and in that film, he wore like a Civil War era jacket and a skinny tie. And so Stutzman added a microphone. He changed the color of the jacket and he stylized the hair and the facial expression and put him on a hot pink background. And I know what you're saying to yourself. That screams new wave, dude.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about, we did a whole kind of series on new wave and it grew out of the 1950s do-it-yourself aesthetic. So it
Yeah, I
kind
can
of
see
fits,
that.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I never knew that the jacket Elvis was wearing in Love Me Tender was a Civil War era jacket.
Yeah,
So
I never knew
there
that
you go.
either. Yeah, that's interesting.
And I mean, do we want to cause a controversy? Do you think it was for the North or the South?
Well, knowing
That's
Elvis,
pretty easy,
yeah, I was gonna say. But Elvis, he traveled all over. Todd, he wasn't. I think he was all about the full continent.
He transcended, yes. But Mark Stutzman, the illustrator, he was no slouch, man. He's done work for a lot of different familiar properties like Batman, Jurassic Park, Space Jam. He's done book covers for an author. What's his name? Steve King. Do you know him? Stephen King?
Oh, the guy from Maine.
Yeah, he's done some of his book covers and even some of his other clients like McDonald's and DC Comics. I mentioned the Batman property.
Mm-hmm.
The New Yorker, one of your favorites, Nickelodeon, Rolling Stone, Microsoft, Time, Esquire, and hold on,
Okay.
even Mad Magazine.
See now, okay. Now I know he's arrived.
Yeah.
All this other stuff was a mere lead up to that.
Yeah, that whole stamp business, blah, blah, whatever.
Yeah,
but he did work for
exactly.
Mad Magazine.
So he's immortal. Okay. So what about, you've talked about young Elvis. Young Elvis was great. He was new wave. He was hip. All these accolades that you've showered upon young Elvis.
Yeah.
What about haggard Elvis? What about flop sweat Elvis? What about the scarves on the old women Elvis? What about him, man? How does he get celebrated?
God, that sounds so awesome when you say it like that.
What do you not want to celebrate with that?
Well,
with that
yeah, the Aloha from Hawaii era Elvis. There was white jumpsuit Elvis. There was nothing better.
Yeah, I think there were a lot of things that were starting to say aloha at that point.
All right, so that illustration, it was actually oil on board by another very famous illustrator named John Berkey. And as you mentioned, that was from the white jumpsuited Vegas era Elvis. And, just like Stutzman, John Berkey, he was no slouch either. He was actually a science fiction artist. And he got his start at, this name will sound familiar to you, Brown and Bigelow. Do you remember we've talked about them in the past?
We have, yes.
Yeah, dogs playing poker, people.
Yeah. So again, he was schooled in the classics.
He was. Now, he didn't paint those, let's just be clear, but he did plenty of other
That
things.
was Cassius Calvin Coolidge, or what was the name of the dude?
Cash Coolidge.
Yeah.
Coolidge. Good memory.
Yeah. Well, I do my best.
He did do lots of book, magazine covers, and film. He did work for NASA, check this out. One of the most famous films that he turned down doing a poster for was 2001: A Space Odyssey in 1968 because he didn't want to move to England.
Why would he have had to move to England to do a film poster?
I don't know, but that's why he turned it down. Maybe Stanley Kubrick said, you have to be here to witness the filming of this.
I have to witness you painting this thing for me or something. Yeah.
Right. But you're asking yourself, all right, so what film posters did he do?
Yeah.
Towering Inferno from 1974.
Hot.
The famous King Kong remake from 1976.
Big.
Yeah, and now see if you can start to spot a trend here. Orca,
Okay.
the Killer Whale, 1977.
Uh-huh.
Meteor from 1979.
That's the bomb.
Black Stallion, 1979.
Well, that's a horse of a different color.
It is. And then Concorde, which was Airport 79. Do you remember all the airport movies from back in the day?
Well, it inspired one of our favorites.
They did. I mean, that's the whole reason why they exist. He's, like I said, he was a science fiction artist. He sold some paintings in 1974 to a guy who was kind of getting a start in film. He was a young, scrappy director, a guy named George Lucas.
Heard of him.
Yeah, and when it came time for George Lucas to work on Star Wars, he hired John Berkey to do the concept art for the original Star Wars.
Concept art for the poster or concept art for like the Star Wars world?
Both. He did original
okay.
poster and the concept art for the world, for the special effects artists to use from there. Now, here's a little bit of some tea being spilled here.
All right, here we go. I knew it. It was only a matter of time.
That was 1976. In 1977, he accepted a commission for Battlestar Galactica. And hence a lawsuit ensued because the studio said, you can't work for both. So
now, wasn't Battlestar Galactica a TV show and not a movie? Or was there a movie that I'm forgetting about?
I know it's a TV show. You know what? I should know. I think it was also a movie, but I know it was a TV show. So it could have been the TV show.
Yeah, because I was going to say, it seems like if that's the case, like if I'm George Lucas, I'm just thinking out loud. If I'm George Lucas and I have some other people using their money and putting some space battle show that's probably going to be worse than mine on TV, you know what I would do? I'd be running friggin' movie trailers for Star Wars. You know what I mean? I would be like, that's free advertising for me. Like this, piece of shit TV show. Like, look at this epic movie. Obviously, the audience loves space battles. Like, it seems to me, I'd be like, yeah, go do it and let me know when it's getting ready to go on TV. And like, I'll steal that audience away or something.
Yeah. Well, I can confirm it was only a TV show at the time.
Yeah. That's amazing. Like, you would think that, well, whatever. I think Lucas turned out okay. Battlestar Galactica, less so.
Yeah, but Battlestar Galactica was like a fast follow to the original Star Wars.
So maybe he just got mad. Like, maybe it's just like, screw these people. I don't want them stealing my thunder.
Well, it was the studios. The studios were like,
okay.
this person, John Berkey, can't work for us and George Lucas as well as our competitor and doing this Battlestar Galactica. He's creating the same science fiction vision for both. So that's what caused the lawsuit.
I see. That's interesting. I wonder if he had like an exclusive agreement, or I'd be very curious to see what the paperwork is, because it seems like you just can't say to some, it's like saying, hey, you're an expert in this, but you can only be an expert in this for us.
Right. Yeah, I don't think there was any kind of exclusive agreement. But of course, when the studios were pushing lawsuits, they had to settle. And the way they settled was that John Berkey could not work for either of them. So how's that?
So, this guy's like, completely out of a job. So, yeah, that's
right.
I love that. I mean, and the other thing I have and you might not know the answer to this question, is did he have an agent or was he representing himself? Like, how is he getting this
I don't know.
work?
I made the assumption that he was representing himself at the time. Well, he got the work because he painted and sold science fiction paintings, and he was known for
people
that.
would find
and George
him.
Lucas,
Absolutely.
George Lucas bought those. When he had the opportunity, he was like, well, I'm going to get this artist to help with the vision. So that's how he was known.
Right. Well, that's a bummer.
And, Orca the Killer Whale, of course.
Yeah, well.
That movie poster.
It's
anyway.
Isn't that the one with the woman swimming and then the orca's swimming toward the surface right under her and she's unaware and she's about to get eaten?
I think that's the shark movie.
What was that one called?
Sharknado?
Oh, okay.
No. It was Jaws. That was Jaws. Of course.
That's right. Right. Yeah, and that was another director. That was a buddy of Lucas's, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know what happened to him. So just a name lost to history.
Yeah, maybe one day we'll do an episode about that.
Yeah, we'll look it up. But anyway, let me get back to talking about some Elvis stamps real quick.
Oh, yeah, I forgot we were doing that.
Yeah, this is a stamp episode, right? So here's the interesting thing. This had never happened. The Postal Service commissioned 8 different artists working independently to create their vision of Elvis and didn't give them a time period to pull from or any clues like that. There's a bunch of those paintings and sketches up on our website. They ended up the Postal Service collected about 60 pieces of art in every imaginable style, from some somber watercolors to abstract modernist design. And
I just love this idea of somber watercolors of Elvis.
I know, right. Of Elvis.
That sounds like a book of poetry or something. It's like, here's Elliot and Todd and their chapbook with the somber watercolors of
right, the somber
Elvis.
Watercolors and the abstract modernist take on Elvis. So, of course, they narrowed these down to the 2 that I mentioned already. Mm-hmm. And this was the first time ever that the Postal Service had opened up stamp design selection to the general public.
Makes total sense, though, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, they created so much of a buzz by having this ballot that was placed, I think, in People magazine or something like that. And they got 1.2 million ballots returned to them. And young Elvis won the vote by more than 75%. So he was chosen to be the first one released on January 8th, like I said. And their initial quantity that they ran was 517 million stamps, which is like 3 times more than they normally do.
Jeez.
And at the time, it was 29-cent stamps back in 1993.
Wow, that's nice. Should have saved some of those for now. I guess that was pre-forever stamp, so
yeah,
29
it was.
cents,
it was.
29 cents. Okay, so new Elvis is issued on his birthday. It kind of makes sense as a bookend. Was older Elvis issued on the day he passed away?
You meant when he allegedly passed away?
Oh, when the aliens came down and abducted him?
Right, that would have been August 16th. No, it was actually issued June 16th, so a couple months before that.
Okay.
And the older Elvis, second Elvis, that was issued with the whole sheet of 35 stamps with some of the other members of the Legends of American Music series, like people you might have heard of: Bill Haley, Clyde McPhatter, Richie Valens, Otis Redding, Buddy Holly, and Dinah Washington. So,
yeah, I remember distinctly the Buddy Holly stamp.
Yeah,
that was probably, I would say, from that series, I remember how cleanly it was. Again, it felt very sort of new wavy, because
it did.
Elvis Costello sort of boosted the Buddy Holly look, and so I always think of like, it was a very sort of Elvis Costello-ish. So I guess maybe we're closing the circle here. It's Elvis-ish again, even though it's Buddy Holly.
Yeah, I was just gonna say we think of that new wave period as the 80s, early 80s, mid 80s, but at that time period of the early 93, that was still kind of influential. And certainly if they were pulling from rock and roll legends, that they were, they had that 50s aesthetic.
Okay. So part of what we've talked about is not only stamps, but stamp collecting. And
yes,
we talked about in our last episode how if you happen to have one of the very first stamps that were ever issued hundreds of years ago, that's obviously worth millions now. We've talked about printing accidents and inverted stamps, and when there's a limited run of those things, how they start to become worth something. So 29-cent face value for young Elvis, old Elvis, and specifically I'm thinking about young Elvis here. 517 million stamps printed, but I bet a lot of those were also used. It's not like people, I mean, I'm sure Elvis fans hung on to them and whatever, but a lot of them were used to pay the water bill or whatever. So how much are these stamps worth now?
Good question. So as I said, their postal rate value was 29 cents. And today, if you wanted to buy a new Elvis stamp, you better be ready to pay about 400 cents to get one.
So $4.
$4.
Okay.
There was a lot. There were a lot issued.
Yeah, and I think it's one of these things. It's like, it just sort of reminds me of like people saving Beanie Babies, right? They're like, I'm going to cash in on this. And you're like, if everybody's saving Beanie Babies, they're not going to be worth a whole heck of a lot.
It just shows you kind of the, the hype around the balloting and the audience picking. Audiences got interested in stamps all of a sudden.
Yeah,
because
that's actually kind of cool. Yeah,
so
they had an
like,
invested interest in it. Yeah. I mean, I think it was this combination of, I think there's a very important lesson here with the Postal Service, right? Like you said, put it in a general circulation magazine. I remember the ballots, now that you say this, I remember going to the post office, like, to buy stamps or mail a letter. And I remember they had a countertop display where you could vote.
Yeah.
And that was when people... there wasn't really email or anything back then, so everybody was going into post offices all the time. So I think between people that had a circulation in the millions and then the thousands of post offices and all the people each one of those locations service, I think it, huge exposure. But again, I think this is a great lesson of give the people what they want.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I mentioned it was the most commemorative stamp ever issued.
Yeah, I'm curious about this.
Okay.
Give me, because I'll be honest with you, I would think like the Buddy Hollies and the folks like that you mentioned, at least the ones that are sticking in my head, that they would be, and again, I'm just saying this off the top of my head, that they've got to be up there and be some of the most popular, but you make it sound like there is a treasure trove of all sorts of different commemorative stamps. So I'm really curious, like if Elvis is the most popular, what comes after that?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. First of all, let's define when I say the most popular commemorative stamp.
Yeah.
The way the Postal Service looks at this data is the number of stamps not used, the number of stamps.
Interesting. So the number of stamps sold, never circulated.
Yeah. So.
Okay. So the Postal Service, this is interesting. So the Postal Service actually keeps track of the specific stamps on the faces of envelopes. Like, so they're actively counting not only if something has a proper stamp on it or the number of stamps, but also which stamps.
I guess maybe
that's
computers
crazy.
do that.
I know, yeah, but I never thought about that. Huh.
Well, so I said there were 517 million initially issued of young Elvis.
Yeah.
Of that, 124.1 million have never been circulated. So that's what makes it the most popular commemorative one. And below that, the numbers drop pretty quickly. Like the next popular one is 87.5 million saved, which is Wonders of America from 2006.
Is that like the natural the parks, the national parks and the natural wonders in the parks?
I assume so.
Or it's not the largest ball of twine or whatever.
Well, if that were the case, I would be saving a lot more of them, but I would assume it's mostly national parks.
Okay.
Yosemite, things like that. The Arch, but there's some other really popular ones that maybe around the time this Elvis stamp was released, it caused a little bit more interest. So The Wonders of America, I mentioned that. Marvel Superheroes in 2007.
Okay.
Star Wars, and also in 2007. There's about 80.8 million of those.
Did our buddy get to do the art for those? Did our young Elvis
so.
guy?
I don't think so. No.
This guy keeps missing out. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Well, I'll hit you with a few more of the most popular ones. Wildflowers, Rock and Roll from that same period, probably. DC Superheroes, Greetings from America. I don't know what that is, but
isn't that the one that's the tourism postcards for each of the 50 states with like the state name really big and that dimensional type, and then they have images inside?
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure.
Maybe, yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
And then one of my favorites, Insects and Spiders.
Is that commemorating your house?
It is. Yeah, when I rent my house out as a haunted house. But
cool.
Yeah, lots of good stuff there.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And the post office, I mean, I got to imagine they love it when people buy and then never use their stamps, because that's free. Absolutely. It's like a gift certificate for them. It's free money, man. Okay.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, so keep making popular stamps, post office, and you'll stay in the black.
Yeah.
All this talk about Elvis, though, Todd, this makes me think we should take a break and order some banana and peanut butter sandwiches.
How about peanut butter sandwiches and banana daiquiris?
Ooh, perfect. I'll help you out, but I've got to go take care of business in a flash, as the saying goes, to make some room for our snack.
I'm not sure any one of us needed to know that, Elliot.
Well, I like to share things, Todd. It's the purpose of this podcast. Anyway, we'll be right back.
Hi. We want to take a moment to mention that if you're enjoying this episode, we have an archive of topics ranging from the Olympics to movie posters.
Think Ghostbusters.
Iconic images.
Think Bigfoot.
Punk music.
The Ramones.
Saturday morning cartoons.
The Pink Panther.
And failed products like OK Soda. Visit our website at twodesignerswalkintoabar.com for full episode notes and visuals, the latest blog content, and to sign up for our newsletter.
Follow us on social media. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Find the links on our website or search using the phrase "Two Designers Walk Into a Bar."
Most importantly, leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps more people like you find podcasts like this.
And tell a friend about us. Send them a link to our podcast from your listening platform of choice.
And if you're inclined, buy our merchandise. Stickers, coasters, magnets, t-shirts. We're designers. We make good stuff, and it helps support the show.
Get in touch. Use the contact form on our website or send an email to hello@twodesignerswalkintoabar.com.
We read every message we get. Honest.
And we're available for speaking gigs. Email us to learn more.
Okay, now, back to the bar.
All right, Todd, so we are back, and I love that you've been talking about the 90s and stamps in the 90s. When I was doing my research, I found out that it was a golden era for stamps during this period. So, in fact, 7 of the series that were on this list of stamps that you mentioned, the most popular stamps, are from that time period, actually. I went back and did a little bit of work on my phone while we were taking a break. And so I want to talk about another series of stamps that highlights celebrities. And these stamps were illustrated by a guy who was as noteworthy as his subjects. However, this series was not one that's on your list, believe it or not. Okay, so I'm going to give you some clues, and let's see if you can figure out who it is.
Okay.
All right. In fact, clues number 1 and number 2, I've already given you. So I said it was a famous illustrator, and it's
Yeah.
a guy. It's someone who's male. So might not narrow it down that much, but take a swing at it.
All right. Well, first name that comes to mind is Andy Warhol.
Ooh, I like that. I like that. And he also loved celebrities, obviously.
Yeah.
But no, it's not him. Okay, so I'm going to give you another clue.
Give me another clue.
Okay. His most well-known work was only done in black and white over the course of a career that spanned 79 years.
Oh, okay.
And he was very famous on the Great White Way.
Yes, we're talking about the wonderful Al Hirschfeld.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so I want to talk about a couple of different stamp series that he illustrated celebrating comedians for the first one and silent movie stars for the second one. But I know we have a lot of folks who, well, it goes without saying, Todd, they love us. But, you know, they might not necessarily love illustration or love design. And may not know who Al Hirschfeld was. So let's start with who he was, and then we can jump in and talk about the stamps. How about that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. So he was an illustrator, American illustrator, caricaturist, best known for his black and white portraits of celebrities and Broadway stars. And he was born back in 1903, and long story very short, his career began to hit its stride in 1924 with the New York Herald Tribune newspaper. Do you remember newspapers, Todd? Do you remember those?
Newspapers. That's when the news used to come on paper?
Yeah. Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
Interesting.
So his flowing style was very unique, and he was considered to be one of the most important figures in contemporary drawing and caricature, and he's influenced countless artists, illustrators, and cartoonists. And his caricatures were regularly drawings of pure line in black ink, for which he used a genuine crow quill on white illustration board.
This was when newspapers were mainly just printed black ink on white paper, right?
Yeah, exactly. This is, the 20s into the 30s. This is between the wars, right? So the printing techniques, reproduction techniques were not nearly as sophisticated as they are now. So that obviously was very widely circulated work, and that's why, a lot of people are familiar with it. But he also actually did a whole bunch of work in color as well. For example, he created full-color paintings for magazines, which had higher production values generally, often the cover artwork. So he did a lot for magazines, popular magazines like TV Guide, Life, Look, New York Times Magazine, and 17, among others. I know that last one was one that you really enjoyed, when you were during your teen years.
Yeah, he did portraits of who like Sean Cassidy and Leif Garrett or something.
Yeah, he was moonlighting for Tiger Beat.
I didn't see Tiger Beat on that list.
So during his 8-decade career, this guy lived to be 99. He lived to be very close to 100, actually.
About a year.
Well, no, I mean like months. I mean he was like 99 years and like 10 months or something like that. I mean, very close. Yeah.
Okay.
So he gained fame by illustrating the actors, singers, and dancers of various Broadway plays, which would appear in advance in the New York Times to note the play's opening. So you were really lauded if readers of the New York Times cracked the newspaper open, went to the entertainment section, and there was a portrait of whoever it was starring in this new Broadway production. That was sort of like you'd arrived. Not only are you in the New York Times, but also Al Hirschfeld illustrated you as a star, right? Though the theater was his best-known field of interest,
Really? I'm surprised to hear that. Off the top of my head, I can't really think of any movies that he has illustrated, but I seem to only know celebrities. Like, he certainly was known for all the big celebrities of the day.
Yeah, I don't think he did concept artwork for Star Wars or Battlestar Galactica.
Not. What?
That would be amazing, though, wouldn't it? Yeah. So he did do original movie posters. He did Charlie Chaplin films. So put a pin in that. We'll come back to that in a minute. And he did work for The Wizard of Oz. And his style also influenced the character design and animation of the genie in the 90s Disney movie Aladdin. And, that shouldn't come as a surprise. I mean, if you sort of think about a combination of Al Hirschfeld and Robin Williams, I mean, you can definitely create a memorable character, right?
Right.
And then he also drew politicians, TV stars, and a wide variety of celebrities ranging from Cole Porter to the cast of Star Trek The Next Generation. That, I can honestly say, is a sentence I never thought I would say in my entire life. You would talk about bookends. And then he also caricatured jazz musicians, including Glenn Miller, Benny Goodman, Artie Shaw, Tommy Dorsey, Fats Waller, Lionel Hampton, Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Dizzy Gillespie, Billie Holiday, Elvis. I mean, the list goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
And Todd, rockers like the Beatles, your buddy Elvis, Bruce Springsteen, Bob Dylan, Jerry Garcia, and Mick Jagger. Okay, now you're going to love this next one. In 1977, he, which was that the year the Orca movie came out? So he might not have seen that. He was busy drawing the cover artwork for Aerosmith's album Draw the Line. So he did caricatures of Aerosmith. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, he could have probably done Towering Inferno at the same time, but I think he did okay with the Aerosmith album.
Yeah, I think that might be a little more well-known. Okay, so one of his most famous things to do was hiding the name Nina, who was his daughter, somewhere in the flowing line work of his illustrations. Then, when he signed the illustrations, he had a number next to his name, next to his signature, like an exponent. And that would be representing the number of times his daughter's name appeared in the drawing. And then that was sort of a game challenging the reader to comb the illustration, really look at everything to try to find all the names buried in there. So that was one of his signatures. Yeah. And so he was the subject of the Oscar-nominated documentary film The Lion King, Line, The Lion King, the Al Hirschfeld story.
Nice, clever.
Yeah. So if people are curious, we'll put a link to that on our episode page.
Yeah, I mean, such... if our listeners maybe don't recognize his name, they certainly would recognize his work. It's completely connected to celebrity culture and theater culture, and he was just incredibly influential. Without a doubt, he's one of the greats.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's Hirschfeld in a nutshell.
Okay.
Now let's talk about the stamps. So the end of more traditional and anonymous postage stamps, so you want to talk about the Elvis stamp, you can actually thank Al Hirschfeld for this a little bit. So the end of more traditional and anonymous postage stamps began in 1981 when officials sought out Hirschfeld to bring some flair to this, little tiny footprint of art that we all enjoy. And then, so that was 81. And it took a decade. So, the wheels of bureaucracy slowly turning. This is government, right? So in 1991, Postmaster General Anthony Frank, which is, I think, a great name, because if you go back to our prior stamps episode, when a stamp is canceled, that's called franking. So maybe that's the reason he got the job. So Anthony Frank released Hirschfeld's Comedians. This was that first series that I mentioned earlier. And that was a booklet of commemorative stamps depicting 5 American comics or comedy acts. So out went the long-standing precedent that a stamp's artist must remain anonymous until at least 10 years after his or her death. I mean, that was crazy. I never knew that.
Yeah, I never did either. That is... I'm sure there's a reason for that, but that's crazy. I never knew that.
Yeah, it's probably like, I think doesn't the Treasury, and maybe we talked about this in our money episode, doesn't the Treasury have a rule that no living people can appear on U.S. currency?
Yes.
I think it'd be, to be honest with you, I think probably the reason the rule was broken is because Hirschfeld's style is so distinctive that there's no way you could commission him and then someone would look at it and say, well, I have no idea who that is. I mean, his stuff was in the New York Times and everywhere else, right?
Yeah, everybody was putting Nina in their drawings back then.
That's right. So the stamps had illustrations of Laurel and Hardy, Abbott and Costello, Bergen and McCarthy, and that, is a ventriloquist and his dummy, Jack Benny and Fanny Bryce. And these were all horizontal layouts, all horizontal rectangles. And then 4 of the 5 stamps, for some reason, Abbott and Costello wasn't included in this exhibit. They were exhibited at Brown University in the fall of 2015 in an exhibit titled U.S. Comedians on Stamps and the Process of Creating a Stamp Design. And it followed the original full-size caricatures through overlays and mock-ups, all the way to their eventual destination as lickable art. So that would be really cool to see the original drawings, and then I think it'd be a great educational opportunity for folks just to see how design and layout happens. And so I'm sorry I missed that. I wish I'd known about it. Maybe there's something online. I'll look for that.
It may be
too.
Traveling or something. Yeah, we can look into it.
So the stamps are naturally fairly minimal, talking about his illustration style. The color scheme is black, red, and a sort of lavendery light purple. And each comedian's name is in sort of this hand-drawn typeface that feels like the Hollywood sign typeface, that kind of all caps, angular corners, blocky typeface. So it kind of makes sense, right? Like when I was looking at it, I thought, oh, that's a nice connection.
Yeah, well, we certainly know all about the Hollywood sign, don't we, from a past episode? We've talked about that.
Yeah, you love the Hollywood sign.
I do. I talked a lot about that. I think we even did some extra stuff on that.
And then the USA and the number 29 are in the same typeface, knocked out of a torn ticket sort of shape. So the 29, of course, being the face value of the stamp. Same with the Elvis stamp. It was released around the same time. So 29 cents for first class postage to mail a letter. And then in 1994, the U.S. Postal Service issued a series of commemorative 29-cent stamps of silent movie stars to coincide with the 37th annual San Francisco Film Festival. And, it makes sense, again, to go back to the well and go back to Hirschfeld, I think. Again, this is his wheelhouse. So this time, in the first series, there were 5. This time, there were 10 stamps total in the series, and each one with an illustration of a silent film star. And the 10 stars were, you've probably heard of some of these folks. Lon Chaney.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Theda Bara.
Ooh, yeah.
Charlie Chaplin. Remember we mentioned him earlier.
Yeah.
Harold Lloyd, if you've ever seen someone hanging off a clock.
That's right. There's a story about that too. That was he was wearing a fake hand because he was missing fingers, by the way. I'll tell you later.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. That goes right along with your hook hand, so I can understand why. Hey-o. Yeah, you're about to get a left hook hand. Zazu Pitts, Rudy Valentino, I know he's one of your favorites, Buster Keaton, John Gilbert, Clara Bow, and the Keystone Cops. So, classics. If there is ever a mascot for this podcast, I think it's got to be the Keystone Cops.
Yeah. No doubt about that. And it looks like these were all vertical stamps.
Yeah, the first set were horizontal, and instead these were all vertical. But aside from that, the feel is very similar to the comedians. It's the same color scheme, same typeface, same layouts. And I really appreciate the consistency because to me, that lends a certain familiarity and visual cadence with the audience. And it really allows the Hirschfeld art to be celebrated, right along with each of the personalities, of course.
Yeah, no doubt. It's like you said, that look, the fine line, flowing line drawing of black ink on white paper is so identifiable with Al Hirschfeld. Even if you don't know his name, you would put it with celebrity culture and theater culture. So yeah, that's really cool. I don't think I'm very familiar with those, so I'll have to take a look at those.
Yeah, and we'll put them on our episode page so all the listeners can jump in and take a look. Yeah, they're super cool. And do you remember the time we tried to hire? Do you remember when you and I were working together and we tried to hire Al Hirschfeld? Yeah.
And I kept calling him Al Hirschfeld. And I think you mentioned that to his rep, and the rep was like, Mr. Hirschfeld.
Yeah. So
that was great.
Yeah. So, and yeah, he he was in his 90s at that point, if I remember correctly. He was not a young guy.
Yeah,
He was working every day. He was still taking commissions, from his apartment in New York or his house in New York. And I remember we ended up, just due to the budget that we had, we ended up finding someone else who could sort of do similar-ish work in his style. But I think what you and I both loved about the guy we did find is he also worked for Mad Magazine freelance.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it wasn't Al Hirschfeld, but it had a wonderful quality about it that we really loved. Yeah, but I do remember you correcting me through the agent correcting you on Mr. Hirschfeld's name. So I've never forgotten that it's not Al Hirschfeld.
Well, I grew up, my mom loves Al Hirschfeld's work. So I actually knew who he was, when I was well before art school or anything.
Nice.
So,
Nice.
So we had not originals, obviously, but again, it was so widely circulated. It was, when he was sort of in his prime, it was very, his work would just sort of come to you. You didn't even have to seek it out because it was in so many magazines and everything. So,
Wow.
I was really happy to find these stamps. It was a nice trip down memory lane.
This has to be our most star-studded episode yet.
Oh, I agree. So as we draw this conversation to a close,
See what you did there.
yeah, can we say that Elvis has left the bar?
Speaking of leaving the bar, before you head out, it's time to pony up for some of these drinks I've been paying for, my friend.
You know what? I'm feeling inspired by all of this stamp talk. So,
Okay.
as the saying goes, the check is in the mail.
And I'm sure it'll arrive with postage due. We'll see you soon, everyone.
Take care.